Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing a super fun tutorial. I love how this top turns out, so I'm really excited about this one. It is a tube top with the flower pattern for the bottom section. Just a quick little disclaimer, I have done a ton of flower tops and a skirt by Anna Green, and then this flower sweater twice by Cameron Kane. So I've memorized the flower pattern. However, I did originally get it from them, and also if I explain it weirdly, check out one of their videos and they'll probably explain it better than I did. But this is definitely a little bit more advanced. I think every beginner should be able to do this. You just need to know all the stitches, and it is a little more complicated, but it's definitely doable. I would just recommend, if you don't know the stitches, to learn them. So I have a beginner tutorial that just shows all the stitches and everything. You could look at that, or you could look them up on your own. Just since this top is a little bit more intricate than other stuff, I'm not going to spend as much time explaining how to do the stitches, more just explaining the pattern. Okay, so starting off with our materials, I'm using Loops and Threads acrylic yarn in weight 4. The color for this is pale gray, and then I have a 4.25mm hook, scissors, and a darning needle. So everything I'm doing is going to be based off of this top. The only thing I really need to change is just make this section a little bit longer. So for my own references, I'm just going to be counting and exactly copying what I do on here. But for you, all you really need to do is just keep measuring up on yourself. We're going to start off from the top. This top section is super simple. We're not even doing the flower pattern yet. For my top section for the bust, it is 56 stitches wide, and the way you're going to be able to tell how wide you need yours to be is to just do these foundation stitches and then to just stretch the width until it reaches pretty much the edge of your shoulder blade on the back. You can always keep testing it as you get further down to make sure it's still the width that you want. So I'm going to do those 56 foundation single crochets. So I'm going to chain 2 and do my first foundation single crochet, and then just keep counting until I reach 56. Again, your number might not be 56. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to count. I'm only counting because I want it to match every single thing about this top except for how long this is. So I'm just gonna add a couple extra rows. At the end of your row, you're going to chain 3, turn your work, skip the first stitch and double crochet into the second stitch, chain 1, skip your next stitch and double crochet into the next stitch. And you're just going to repeat this chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into the next for the entire row. If you reach the end and you have 3 stitches left after your last double crochet, then you're just going to skip 2 and double crochet into the last, pretending that you're pretty much only skipping 1. It won't really make a difference. If you're worried about that, you can definitely just take 1 extra stitch off or add 1 extra stitch at the end of your foundation row. This is definitely the time where you can change things and take things apart, because you don't really want to be taking stuff apart for very long on this. But at this point, it won't really matter and won't take too much extra time if you do need to change something like that. Okay, and coming up to the end of this row, just continuing that exact same thing, and you just want to chain 1 and double crochet into that corner stitch like so. For the next many rows, you're just going to be doing single crochets and do every single stitch, and the number of rows you do is going to depend on how long the bust section needs to cover. This section, in my opinion, should be above the bust section, and this should be below it. So just keep that in mind. They're gaps, so they're not going to really give you coverage. So you want those single crochets to cover as much as you need it to. For this one, I have 18 or 19 rows, but for this one, I think I'm going to add at least 3 more rows. I think that'll probably be enough. And for this next one, you're just going to start it chaining 1, turn your work, and for this, you're going to single crochet into that first double crochet, single crochet into that chain. You could single crochet into the gap, but I feel it does just give a cleaner look if you single crochet into the chain. But either way, you're just going to single crochet into every stitch in the row, making sure that you're not skipping the gap. You're also going to do a single crochet into that and a single crochet into each double crochet. And at the end of the row, you should definitely go back and count. Just make sure you have the same number of stitches that you did on your very first row, because that is the width that you want it to be. You want to make sure you're not skipping any stitches. And then if your number is short, just undo this row and redo it, or check your double crochet row because you might have skipped a stitch in that row if your numbers are wrong. And then at the end of the row, you just want to make sure you go into that double crochet and you put a single crochet into those 3 chains you have at the end. Next, you're going to chain 1, turn your work, and single crochet into every single stitch, except this time you're not having to go into any chains, you're just going into single crochets. And once again, if you're worried about not getting the same number at the end of each row, you can keep counting and just match up that number with the previous row. Or if you think you're fine, you can just kind of like check over the row, just make sure there's not any skipped rows. So like if I were to skip that one, you would just be able to stretch it out and see that that stitch does not have any single crochet into it. Whereas if I had gone into it, it should look like that. But I will come back to you after we've done these single crochet rows. So chaining 1 at the beginning of each of these rows, single crocheting into every single stitch up to the last, chaining 1, turning your work, and single crocheting. And once again, just keep making sure that this is long enough for you, so you're just going to keep holding it up and making sure it's long enough. I honestly feel like the longer the better. Like if you're unsure, just add an extra row or 2 and just be 100% positive that it is long enough, because I finished this entire top and then tried it on and realized it was like a tiny bit too small. Okay, I finally just finished these single crochet rows. I'm gonna be honest, that took me over half an hour, so I'm kind of not loving how long that took, but it's okay. Finally we're on to the fun part. Our next row is going to be another one of these double crochet gap rows, so the exact same thing as we did there, starting off with 3 chains, turning our work, skipping the first stitch, going into the second with a double crochet, chaining 1, skip 1, double crochet, and repeating that for the entire row. At the end, doing our last one into that corner stitch with a double crochet. And then our next row is very simple. We're just going to do double crochets the entire row, so chaining 2, turning our work, and just like we did when we were doing those single crochets into the gap row, we're going to go into the first, into the chain, and then into the double crochet, and just repeating that in the entire row, just doing your double crochets. And once again, if you're worried about keeping your number the same, you can count, but at this point, like, it doesn't really make too much a difference. If you're a couple numbers off, you can always just add a little bit of like cushioning double crochets at the edge, but I will explain that a little bit more once we're actually in the flower section. At the corner, remembering to go into the chains themselves with a double crochet. Okay, now is the part where I need to figure out how to explain this in a way that makes sense. So basically, each flower itself is 22 stitches. This middle section is another 4 stitches. So it's like each flower is 22, 4 stitches between, 22 more. But just doing those flowers with nothing else at the end might not fit. And like for me personally, on this top, it did not fit. So I had an extra 6 stitches, including my chains at the edge, at the very end, past the flower pattern. So basically, if you want to just do 1 flower, I would recommend counting out what your total number is. So let's say your total number of this bust section is 50. What you would do is you would subtract 22, which would give you 28. Then you divide that 28 by 2, which gives you 14. So what you would do is do 14 double crochets, make your flower with those 22 stitches, and then 14 double crochets. And that is only if you want to only have 1 flower and just do double crochets for the rest of it. But if you want to do multiple flowers, what I would recommend doing is, honestly, you could do the same thing of counting and everything and making sure that it's centered so that your 2 flowers are centered, and then you have those extra double crochets on the edges. Or what I did, because I was kind of lazy, is I just had those extra 6 double crochets at the edge, and it really makes no difference when it's on because this is behind your back, and so it's like not noticeable at all. What I recommend is going back and recounting the number you have in this section, or if you already remember it, then you're fine, and see how many sets of 22 you can fit into that. And so I have 56. I can do 2 flowers plus that 4 in the middle, which gives me 50, and then that gives me those extra 6 at the end. So 22, 4, and 22, and then those extra 6 at the end. If that makes any sense. I really hope it does, but I'm so sorry if it doesn't. If you're doing the one flower and then the double crochets on the edge, literally every single row, you're going to do those 14 or whatever your number is, double crochets, and then start the row. So like, let's say row 1, I say do a double crochet gap. You're gonna do 14 stitches and then start your double crochet gap and then continue with like, I think it's like 8 and then a double crochet, or like 10 double crochet. But basically, depending on how you're gonna do it, you wanna add those extra stitches at the beginning and the end, or just literally ignore that I'm doing those extra stitches and start off at the flower pattern. So after that long ramble, we are going to actually start doing the flower pattern with our gap rows. Okay, and for this flower section, your chains at the end are going to count as a stitch. So if I say do 8 stitches at the beginning of the row, you're going to do your chains, and that counts as your first double crochet. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to do a chain 2, turn our work, and then do 7 more double crochets because this is our first double crochet. So 1, 2, 3, and 8. And for this section, I would recommend you go back and count that you're doing the right number because it will get messed up if you are off on your count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then what you're going to do here, instead of doing gaps like this, you're going to chain 2, skip 2 stitches, and then go into the 3rd stitch with a double crochet. Now you're going to do 2 more double crochets, 1 and 2. You're going to do 1 more, then you're going to chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet. We're going to do 17 more double crochets until we do any more gaps. So including this one, that makes it 17, but if you're skipping this one, it's 16. So 1, 2, 3. After those 17 double crochets, you're going to chain 2, skip 2, double crochet into the 3rd, do 3 more double crochets, which gives you 4 total. Then you're going to chain 2 more, skip 2, double crochet, and then you're just going to double crochet until the end of the row. If you do not have those extra stitches, it should be the same 8 stitches like on this side, but I will have extra stitches, so I'm just going to double crochet until the end. I did end up being 1 stitch off from my other top, so I have 7 stitches left. So at this side of the top, I'm going to be doing 7 extra double crochets on every single row. When I start the next row, I'm going to do those 7 double crochets, and then we're going to start doing the flower pattern. On the screen, I'm just going to put like extra double crochet, which just means if you need to do those extra double crochets, do them. If you don't, skip that and then start off with the pattern. So I'm going to do my 7. Starting my next row, I'm going to chain 2, turn my work, and do 6 more double crochets because those chains count as a double crochet. But again, you might not need to be doing these. If you are not doing those extra double crochets at the end, you do not need to do this part. And if your number is different than mine, just do those double crochets, and then I will tell you where to start from. So now that I have my double crochets at the edge, this is where the flower pattern starts. We're going to just double crochet until we are 3 stitches away from the first gap. Okay, now I'm 3 stitches away. I'm going to chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet into that stitch right before the gap. Then I'm going to do 2 double crochets into the gap. And for this part, we're not going to double crochet into the chains. We're literally just double crocheting into the gap itself. Do 1 double crochet after the gap, chain 2, double crochet to the stitch right before the gap, 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 double crochet after, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet into the 3rd, and then now we're going to double crochet until we're 3 stitches away from the next gap. you should end up having 11 double crochets in between this gap and then up to your next. So now we're going to chain 2, double crochet into the stitch before the gap, 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 after, chain 2, double crochet into the stitch before the next gap, where you should be skipping these 2 stitches in the middle, 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 after, chain 2, skipping 2 stitches and double crochet into the third. And here is where my side of the flower pattern is correct. You should be ending exactly like me, where you have 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So now we have these first 2 rows, and our next row is going to start with these petals of the flower. So what you're going to do is chain 2, turn your work, and then you're going to double crochet into this first stitch. Normally we do not double crochet into what we chained into, but just for the sake of having it be a little bit more even, we are going to for these first petal rows. Now you're going to chain 2, skip 2, double crochet into the one before the gap, just like normal, 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 after the gap, and now is where we're going to make our petal. So we're going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to make a treble crochet. So wrapping around your underhook once, and then a second time, going into this middle gap. So we have 3 gaps here. We're going into the middle one, pulling through, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2. Now we're going to chain 4 again. We're going to go into the stitch right before this third gap with a double crochet. And then we're going to repeat the same thing. So 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 after the gap, and then we're going to chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet into the third. So now we have the first part of this first flower done, and we're going to repeat that with the second one, but we are going to do a total of 5 double crochets in this middle area here. And then we're going to resume with our chain 2, skip 2 to make a gap, 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 double crochet after the gap, and then we're going to repeat that treble crochet thing. So chaining 4, making our treble crochet into the gap itself, in the middle gap out of these 3, make the treble crochet, chain 4 again, and then double crochet into the stitch before the third gap. 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 double crochet after, then we're going to make our last gap of the row, chaining 2, skipping 2, and double crochet. So if you do not have your extra stitches, this is where your row will end off, and you're going to skip to the next row. Starting your next row, you're going to chain 2 like normal. I'm going to make my extra stitches. So now I've made my extra stitches. You should be 1 stitch away from the gap. You're going to double crochet into the one before the gap, 2 into the gap, 1 after, and now we're going to chain 5, and you're going to single crochet into the gap right before this treble crochet, making a single crochet. Then you're going to single crochet into that treble crochet, then you're going to single crochet right after the treble crochet into the gap. You're going to chain 5 again, and you're going to double crochet right before this gap. you're going to do 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 after, and here you're going to chain 3 because we have 3 stitches to skip, and then you're going to double crochet into the stitch right before the next gap. So the reason we chain 3 is because we have 5 stitches here. The first and last stitch are covered by our double crochets, and then the middle 3 are reflected by those chains. So now we're going to do the same thing, doing 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 after, chaining 5, doing a single crochet right before the treble crochet, a single crochet into the treble crochet, and then a single crochet right after, chaining 5 again, and then this is the side where my pattern perfectly matches the flower pattern, so you should double crochet right before the gap, 2 into the gap, and then 1 into that last double crochet. Since I don't have any extra stitches, I'm going to move on immediately to the next row where you should as well, chaining 2, turning the work, and then now we're going to chain 6 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you should have a total of 8 chains. Then you're going to single crochet right before this cluster of single crochets into the gap. Do 3 single crochets, so into every single crochet that we did last round, 2, 3, and then you're going to do a single crochet into the next gap right there. So you should have 5 single crochets total. Now you're going to chain 6 again. You're going to double crochet right before this gap, do 3 double crochets into the gap, and then a double crochet right after. Now you're going to immediately move on to those 6 chains again. This row does not have any gaps, and so we're going to do that single crochet into the gap, 3 single crochets, and then a single crochet after the gap, chaining 6, and then doing a double crochet into what would be your last stitch if you do not have extra stitches like I do, like so. And so if you're moving on to the next row because you don't have extra stitches, you're going to chain 2 and then wait for me to come back. So I'm just going to do my extra stitches really quick. I'm going to chain 2 and turn my work. I'm going to do my extra stitches. So here I'm going to start the flower pattern. I'm going to do a double crochet into the stitch, but you should just do your chain 2 at the beginning of your row and then start double crocheting into the gap because your chain 2 is going to count as a stitch. So with your first double crochet, which is your chain 2, you're going to do 3 double crochets into the gap. You should have 4 total. Next, you're going to chain 5. And we're going to repeat this row where we had our chain 5 and 3 single crochets. So we have 5 single crochets from our previous row. We're going to skip the first single crochet into the next, into the next, into the next. So you have 3 single crochets total for this row. You're going to skip that last single crochet and chain 5 again. Then you're going to make 3 double crochets into the gap. One to the stitch right after. You're going to chain 3, skip 3 and double crochet into the last. Do 3 double crochets into the gap. And now we're going to repeat the same thing. So doing 5 chains, single crocheting not into the first but into the second, third, and fourth, skipping the 5th, and chaining 5, double crocheting 3 times into the gap. And then what I personally like to do so that the double crochets can't just like slide around on these chains is to do my last double crochet into the 3rd chain on this row of chains. So double crocheting into that. Otherwise you can just put your last double crochet into the gap, but the one thing is that it will be able to scoot back and forth like that. All 4 of them will, but because this is into the chain, it like stops it right there. Okay, and so this is where my top does match the flower pattern, so immediately we're gonna chain 2, turn our work, we're gonna double crochet into that first stitch, we're gonna chain 2, skip 2 and double crochet into the one before the gap, do 3 double crochets into the gap, now you're going to chain 4, and we're repeating the first row of petals that we did. So we're going to do a treble crochet into the middle of those 3 single crochets. So skipping the first, going into the second. With the treble crochet, then we're going to chain 4 again, and do 3 double crochets into this gap. Then we're going to do a double crochet into the stitch right after, chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet into the last. Do 3 double crochets into this gap. One double crochet right after. Chain 2, skip 2, double crochet into the last before the gap. 3 double crochets into the gap, 4 chains, repeating that treble crochet into the second single crochet, skipping the first one, chaining 4 more, and double crocheting 3 times into the gap. And 1 time right after. Now you should chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet into the 3rd, and this is where the flower pattern ends, and I'm going to do my extra stitches. So if you don't have those extra stitches, chain 2 and turn your work right here. So now I'm chaining 2 and turning my work. I'm going to do my extra stitches. Okay, and here's where the flower pattern starts. So you're starting with your chain 2, and I'm doing a double crochet into that stitch as well, doing 2 double crochets into the gap, but I'm doing a double crochet into that stitch instead. Your chain 2 counts as a double crochet. You're going to do 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 right after, chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet into the next. You're going to do 3 double crochets into the gap, chain 2, skip this middle section, and do 3 double crochets into the next gap, so basically into the next petal. 2 and 3, doing a double crochet right after, chaining 2, skipping 2, and double crocheting into the stitch right before the next gap, 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 right after, and then we're going to double crochet up to here. So continuing our double crochets, doing 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 double crochet right after, and then we're going to repeat that same pattern, chaining 2, skipping 2, double crocheting into the 3rd, 3 double crochets into this first gap, chaining 2, skipping 2, and 3 double crochets into the next gap. Doing 1 double crochet right after. And again, this is the side where my pattern does match. So we're chaining 2, skipping 2, double crocheting into the one before the gap, 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 double crochet right after, and that is the end of your row. And I have no extra stitches on this side. So immediately we're going to chain 2 and turn our work. And for this next row, we're just reflecting this same row where we have 2 gaps per flower. So you're going to double crochet up to that first gap, do 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 double crochet right after, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet into the one before the gap, 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 after, chain 2, skip 2 and double crochet into the one before the gap, 2 into the gap, and then 1 right after. And now you're just going to double crochet all the way up to that next gap. We're going to do 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 right after, and then chain 2, skip 2, double crochet, 2 into the gap, 1 right after, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet, 2 double crochets into the gap, 1 right after, and then you're just going to double crochet up to the end of the row. But remember, I have my extra stitches on this side, so I have a lot more stitches left than you do if you don't have those extra stitches. Okay, and then for your last row, you can either do double crochets into every stitch or single crochets, which is what I did in my other top. So I'm going to chain 1. If you're doing double crochets, chain 2. Turn your work and do those single crochets or double crochets into every single stitch. And if you want it to look neater along the edge, then I would recommend going into the chains instead of just going into the gaps once you reach those sections. Okay, and coming up to our last stitches, I'm just gonna go into every single one. Like normal, you can go into the chain if you want to, but it doesn't really make a difference. Then we're gonna chain 1 and cut off our work. And pull the yarn through and just tighten it up. So now we're completely done, except for adding in the chain for the back tie. So I'm just gonna fold it over like so I have room to add the tie. And so we're just gonna do a tie like this with chains. And I honestly cannot be bothered to count, but I think you probably should go around like 150 to 200. But if you're like me and you don't really like counting when you're doing chains, just chain a long amount and then measure it up and make sure that it's long enough to fit. At the end of your chains, you're gonna chain 1 extra and cut off your work, pull it through to tighten it up. And now we can move on to weaving it through. So you're gonna start off in this top corner, pushing your hook through, hooking the chains and pulling them through like that. next corner, go through, grab on and pull it through. And then I'm just gonna follow the pattern of how many I skipped on my other one, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference, to be honest. So for this first one, we're gonna skip the double crochet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and go into the 6th single crochet. This part does not need to be exact. I'm literally just making it exact because I'm copying the other top. If you're making this from scratch, just skip a few. You don't even have to count. Do the same thing on the other side though. I would recommend making sure you're even on both sides. Pushing my hook through, grab the yarn, oh my God. And then doing the exact same thing, skipping 5 and going into the 6th. Same thing on the other side. And then I'm gonna go in between my first 2 gap rows, so right here, and that is going to be with my last one. And on this side, so right here. Okay, and so now we are completely done except weaving in our ends. I will do a very fast run through weaving in ends. I will do 1 on the chain and 1 on the actual top. And then I'm gonna do the rest off camera because I've been recording for a couple hours. But if you need a refresher on weaving in ends, I show how to do them in my ultimate beginner tutorial, so you can always check that out. So what I like to do to get the yarn on my needle easier is like lay it over, slide it off, pinching with my finger, and then wiggle it through. And then it just makes it super fast. For chains, I like to just go through the sides a couple times and then come back up to the top. And then I kind of like to force it through where the knot is, so it's kind of like a tighter spot to fit into. And then pull it through and cut it off. Honestly, I feel like there's nothing wrong with not weaving in your ends for chains and just like cutting off a little bit of yarn. But just for the sake of showing you, I will do it. And then for when we're doing it into the actual top, I do the same thing, laying it over, pinching, pulling it off, push it through, and then I kind of do the same thing, going through a couple times, and then I go into like the actual stitch, out the side, and then out through where that knot is. And then cutting off my work, and then cutting off the end, and there you go. I will come back once I finish weaving in the ends. Thankfully there's only a few for this top. Okay, now we are completely done with this top. I'm so happy, even though it took me like a couple hours honestly to make it. I just love how these tops turn out, and I'm excited to have one that actually fits me properly. Now I have it in 2 colors, but yeah. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you make one of these, please make sure to tag me on TikTok, Instagram, on YouTube, whatever, because I would love to see how yours turned out. If you have any questions, let me know down below and I will do my best to help. Or in this case, you could also check out the tutorials that I mentioned in the beginning. I'm hoping to remember to link them below, but if I forget, then just go back to the beginning of the video and look at the intro and I'll say the channel names. Make sure to check out my Depop and my Etsy to see crochet stuff that I'm selling. Unfortunately, I'm keeping both of these, so I won't be selling one of these, but I do have a lot of other stuff listed on there, including stuff that I've done in tutorials on my channel. But yeah, otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!